Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more English story. The struggle within. I always believed my greatest battles were with the world around me. I thought if I worked harder, proved myself more, and stayed ahead, I could conquer anything. But as time went on, I realized that the real enemy wasn't out there. It was inside my own mind. For years, my thoughts controlled me. They told me I wasn't good enough, that I was a failure, that every mistake I made defined me. It didn't matter how much I achieved or how many people praised me. The voice in my head always whispered, "You're not enough." I carried this weight like an invisible chain. Every new opportunity felt like a burden because I was terrified of failing. Every kind word felt hollow because I didn't believe it myself. On the outside, I looked put together. But inside, I was drowning in self-doubt. The breaking point. It all came to a head one night when I was alone in my apartment, staring at the blank screen of my laptop. I had a deadline looming for a project I cared deeply about, but I couldn't bring myself to type a single word. My mind was racing. What if it's not good enough? What if they hate it? Why even bother? The pressure felt unbearable. I closed my laptop, sat on the floor, and broke down. For the first time in years, I admitted to myself that I was stuck, not because of external circumstances, but because I was trapped in my own mind. The spark of realization. In the midst of that low moment, a thought crossed my mind. What if it doesn't have to be this way? It was such a simple idea, but it felt revolutionary. I realized that my thoughts were just that, thoughts. They weren't facts. They weren't truths. They were just stories I had been telling myself for years. But if I had created those stories, maybe I could change them. The first step. The next morning, I made a decision. I didn't know how, but I was going to take back control of my mind. I started small, with one simple promise. Every time a negative thought crept in, I would challenge it. When the voice said, "You're not good enough," I asked myself, "Who says?" When it whispered, "You'll never succeed," I countered, "What if I do?" It wasn't easy. In fact, it was exhausting at first. My mind resisted change, clinging to its old patterns. But I reminded myself that I had spent years feeding those negative thoughts. Changing them would take time. Discovering tools to help me stay on track. I turned to tools I had never considered before. I started journaling, writing down my fears and challenging them on paper. I practiced mindfulness, learning to observe my thoughts without letting them control me. I also began reading books and listening to talks by people who had conquered their own mental struggles. Their stories inspired me, showing me that I wasn't alone, and that change was possible. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Rewiring the mind. Change didn't happen overnight. The voice of doubt was persistent, like a shadow that refused to fade. But I had made a promise to myself to challenge every negative thought, and I was determined to keep it. One morning, as I stood in front of the mirror, that familiar voice crept in. You'll mess up again. Why even try? This time, instead of letting it take over, I stared at my reflection and said aloud, I'm learning. Mistakes don't define me, they teach me. First, the words felt strange, almost hollow. But I repeated them anyway, like a mantra. Day by day, I started to believe them, building new habits. To conquer my mind, I knew I had to create new habits. I started setting aside 10 minutes each morning to visualize success, not just achieving my goals, but feeling calm and confident while doing it. First, it felt silly, but over time, those few minutes became a powerful tool. They helped me start my day with a clear focus and a sense of control. I also kept a wins journal. Each evening, I wrote down 3 things I had done well that day, no matter how small. Sometimes it was as simple as finishing a task on time or resisting the urge to procrastinate. These little victories reminded me that progress was happening, even if I couldn't always see it. Facing the fear. The biggest breakthrough came when I decided to face one of my deepest fears: public speaking. For years, the mere thought of standing in front of a crowd made my stomach churn. But I realized that if I kept avoiding my fears, they would continue to control me. So when a colleague asked if I could present at an upcoming meeting, I said yes, even though every fiber of my being wanted to say no. The days leading up to the presentation were filled with anxiety. But instead of letting the fear overwhelm me, I used the techniques I had been practicing. I visualized myself speaking confidently, imagined the audience responding positively, and reminded myself that even if I stumbled, it wouldn't be the end of the world. The turning point. When the day came, my hands were shaking as I stood in front of the room. But I took a deep breath, looked at the faces in the audience, and began to speak. I stumbled over a few words at first, but then something incredible happened. I found my rhythm. The fear didn't disappear entirely, but it no longer controlled me. I focused on the message I wanted to share. And by the time I finished, the room erupted in applause. That moment was more than just a successful presentation. It was proof that I could overcome my fears. It showed me that the limits I thought existed were just in my mind. A new perspective. Over time, I started to see my mind not as an enemy, but as a powerful tool, one that could either work for me or against me, depending on how I chose to use it. The key was understanding that I had the power to rewrite the stories I told myself. Instead of saying, I can't do this, I started asking, how can I make this work? The more I practiced, the more natural it became. And with every small victory, I felt a renewed sense of confidence and clarity. Moral. The story emphasizes that true change begins in the mind. Your thoughts shape your reality. And by learning to challenge and reframe negative beliefs, you can unlock a version of yourself that you never thought possible. Fear and self-doubt are natural, but they lose their power when faced with persistence and self-compassion. Growth isn't about perfection. It's about progress and the courage to keep moving forward, even when it feels uncomfortable. Part 3. Mastering the mind. Months passed, and I began to notice a shift. The things that once paralyzed me, fear of failure, self-doubt, and overthinking, had less of a grip on me. I wasn't immune to negative thoughts, but they no longer dictated my actions. One day, my mentor shared a piece of advice that stuck with me. Your mind is like a garden. If you don't tend to it, weeds will grow. But if you nurture it with care, it will flourish. I realized I had been letting weeds grow for years, allowing self-doubt and negativity to take root. Now, I was finally planting seeds of positivity, confidence, and resilience. The power of consistency. The biggest lesson I learned was that consistency matters more than motivation. There were days when I didn't feel like journaling, meditating, or practicing gratitude. But I did it anyway, because I knew those small daily actions were building something bigger. One evening, as I reviewed my journal, I was struck by how far I had come. My early entries were filled with doubt and fear, but now, they reflected hope and strength. It wasn't just my thoughts that had changed, it was how I approached life itself. Inspiring others. As my confidence grew, people around me started to notice. Friends and colleagues began asking how I had turned things around. I shared my journey honestly, emphasizing that it wasn't a magic fix, it was a process. I told them about the nights I doubted myself, the moments I wanted to give up, and the small steps that eventually led to big changes. One friend, who had always struggled with low self-esteem, said, "Hearing your story makes me think I can change too." That moment reinforced something powerful. By conquering my own mind, I was creating a ripple effect, inspiring others to believe in themselves. A life transformed. One of the biggest tests came when I faced a major setback. A project I had poured my heart into didn't go as planned, and the old voice of doubt tried to creep back in. "You're a failure." But this time, I didn't let it take over. Instead, I reminded myself of the truth. Setbacks are part of the journey. They don't define you, they refine you. Picked myself up, analyzed what went wrong, and used the experience as a stepping stone. Instead of seeing failure as the end, I saw it as an opportunity to grow. The journey continues. As I stood at the crossroads of my life, I realized that conquering your mind isn't a destination, it's a lifelong journey. There will always be challenges, fear, and doubts. But I now had the tools to face them head-on. Each day was an opportunity to practice, to grow, and to choose the mindset that would shape my life. I wasn't perfect, and I didn't need to be. What mattered was that I kept moving forward, one thought at a time. I learned that the real victory wasn't in achieving perfection but in the act of choosing courage over fear, progress over perfection, and self-belief over doubt. And it all started with the decision to conquer my mind. Moral. The moral of this story is that mastering your mind is the key to transforming your life. Your thoughts are not always facts, and you have the power to shape them. Every small positive change you make in how you think and perceive yourself adds up over time, creating a more resilient, confident, and capable version of yourself. Conquering your mind is not about eliminating fear or doubt, it's about facing them with courage, learning from setbacks, and continuing to grow despite the obstacles. The journey of self-mastery is ongoing, but it's one that leads to true freedom and empowerment. Part 4. The ongoing battle. Even though I had made significant progress, I knew my journey wasn't over. Mastering my mind wasn't something that could be achieved once and for all, it was a continuous effort. One day, as I sat in a coffee shop preparing for a big presentation, the familiar wave of anxiety washed over me. The old voice crept in, whispering, "You're not prepared enough. You're going to mess this up." But this time, I didn't panic. I didn't fight the thought or try to push it away. Instead, I acknowledged it. I accepted that the fear was there and that it was normal. I reminded myself that my mind was still a work in progress, and fear didn't mean I wasn't capable. Reframing fear. I'd learned that fear wasn't something to avoid, it was something to reframe. Instead of seeing it as a signal of impending failure, I started to view it as a signal that I was stepping out of my comfort zone and growing. As I stood in front of the room to present, my hands still shook a little, but I knew that the fear was just a part of the process. Instead of focusing on the fear, I focused on the message I wanted to share and the people in front of me who would benefit from it. I took a deep breath, smiled, and began. The growth beyond comfort. Over the next few months, I continued to face new challenges, both personally and professionally. Some days were harder than others, and there were times when the doubts crept back in. But I didn't let them control me. I reminded myself that growth didn't happen in comfort, it happened when I stretched beyond it. Every new challenge, whether big or small, was an opportunity to strengthen my mindset. One of the most powerful lessons I learned during this time was that comfort zones are often the greatest barriers to growth. I had spent so many years avoiding discomfort, but I now understood that it was in those uncomfortable moments that I would truly evolve. Helping others overcome. As I continued to grow, I found myself in a position to help others. Friends and colleagues who struggled with similar challenges reached out to me for advice. I shared my journey, encouraging them to confront their own fears and negative thoughts. The more I helped others, the more I realized how interconnected our journeys are. When we face our own fears and rise above them, we not only transform ourselves but also inspire those around us to do the same. A moment of reflection. One quiet evening, I found myself reflecting on how far I had come. A few years ago, I was paralyzed by doubt and fear, unable to move forward. Now, I stood in a completely different place, not free from fear, but empowered to face it. It wasn't the absence of fear that made me strong, it was my ability to take action despite it. I had learned to trust myself, to believe in my ability to overcome challenges, and to keep pushing forward. no matter the obstacles. Embracing the journey. Now, I look at my mind as a tool, one that needs regular care and attention. I still have moments of doubt, fear, and uncertainty, but I don't let them define me anymore. I face them, learn from them, and keep moving forward. The journey of mastering your mind is not a linear path. It's a winding road with setbacks and triumphs. But as long as you continue to show up for yourself, as long as you keep working to reframe your thoughts and face your fears, the road ahead will be filled with possibility. And that's the beauty of it. The journey of self-mastery never truly ends, but it's always worth it. Moral. The moral of this story is that mastering your mind is an ongoing journey, not a destination. It's about acknowledging fear and self-doubt, but not letting them control your actions. True strength comes from your ability to keep moving forward despite uncertainty. And growth happens when you step outside of your comfort zone. Each challenge is an opportunity to evolve. And by helping others along the way, you create a ripple effect that spreads empowerment. Ultimately, mastering your mind means embracing both the struggle and the progress, and trusting that the journey itself will lead to greater strength and fulfillment. Part 5. The lasting change. The journey of conquering my mind didn't stop there. As time passed, I began to notice a change not only in myself but in the way I saw the world. The doubts, the fears, and the voices that once held me back now felt distant. But the real test was always how I would respond when life inevitably threw a curveball. It came unexpectedly, a challenging situation at work. A project I had worked on for months was suddenly jeopardized due to unforeseen circumstances. The old anxiety crept back in, and for a moment, I questioned whether I was strong enough to handle it. But then I paused. I realized that I had faced worse challenges before. This time, I didn't allow fear to take over. Instead of dwelling on the problem, I shifted my focus to the solution. I gathered my team, reassessed the situation, and together, we found a way forward. Riding the waves of change. As I continued to encounter life's challenges, I found myself becoming more resilient. The battles in my mind were no longer as intense, but I knew that staying mentally strong required ongoing effort. I kept up with the daily habits I had built: journaling, meditation, and practicing gratitude. These tools weren't just for difficult times. They were essential to maintaining my peace and focus during calm times as well. One day, a friend asked me, "How do you keep going? How do you keep overcoming these challenges?" I smiled and responded, "It's not that I have it all figured out. I just know that no matter how tough it gets, I won't let it break me. I keep my mind strong. And that's what gets me through." The impact on others. What truly surprised me was how my journey impacted those around me. My colleagues, friends, and even family members began to notice the change in me. They saw someone who had once been overwhelmed by doubt, now tackling challenges with confidence and grace. And many of them started asking for advice, seeking to overcome their own struggles. Helping others became as rewarding as conquering my own fears. I shared the lessons I had learned, the strategies that had worked for me, and encouraged them to believe in themselves. It wasn't about perfection. It was about progress, living with purpose. As I continued on this path, I realized that the most powerful part of this journey was not in the end result, but in the ongoing process. The act of mastering my mind was teaching me to live with more purpose. I wasn't just reacting to life anymore. I was taking charge of it. I knew that I could face whatever came my way, not because I was immune to challenges, but because I had learned how to approach them with resilience, patience, and a deep belief in my ability to navigate them. The future ahead. Looking ahead, I know that there will be new challenges, new fears, and new obstacles. But I also know that I am no longer the same person who once felt powerless against them. The growth I've experienced in my mind has become the foundation of my life, and it will continue to guide me through every step of the journey. So, I face the future with courage, knowing that each day is a new opportunity to strengthen my mind, embrace new experiences, and inspire those around me. The road ahead may not always be easy, but I'm ready to walk it, one step at a time. And that's the beauty of conquering your mind. It's not about never experiencing fear again. It's about learning how to move forward with confidence, no matter what comes your way. Moral. The moral of this story is that conquering your mind is an ongoing journey, not a one-time achievement. The power to navigate life's challenges lies in your mindset and your ability to face fear, uncertainty, and setbacks with resilience. True strength comes from consistency, self-belief, and the willingness to grow, learn, and help others along the way. Mastery of the mind is about embracing the process, understanding that growth is not linear, and knowing that every challenge you overcome adds to your inner strength. The journey may be tough, but it's through the ongoing commitment to self-mastery that you will create the life you desire. Part 6. A life transformed. Years had passed since the day I first decided to take control of my mind. Looking back, it was impossible to pinpoint the exact moment when everything changed. It wasn't a single event, but rather a series of small decisions, choices, and moments that gradually shaped who I had become. I was no longer the person who allowed fear to paralyze me or doubt to define me. My mind had become a place of peace and strength. When challenges arose, I no longer reacted impulsively or with anxiety. Instead, I approached them with calm, clarity, and the knowledge that I had the tools to navigate them. The power of self-reflection. One of the most powerful tools I had learned to use was self-reflection. It wasn't just about journaling or meditating, but about taking a moment to check in with myself. To ask, how am I feeling? What thoughts are running through my mind? Am I allowing fear or negativity to take control? This practice of self-awareness helped me stay grounded. It reminded me to pause before reacting, to be mindful of my emotions, and to trust in my ability to handle whatever came my way. I realized that this ongoing process of self-reflection was what kept me on track. It was easy to slip back into old patterns if I wasn't paying attention. But by making self-awareness a daily habit, I ensured that I kept growing instead of stagnating. Embracing vulnerability. Another realization that changed my life was the power of vulnerability. For years, I had avoided showing my true feelings. I believed that being vulnerable made me weak or exposed. But as I grew stronger mentally, I understood that vulnerability was actually a sign of strength, not weakness. In my personal and professional relationships, I began to open up. I shared my struggles, my fears, and my uncertainties. It wasn't about seeking sympathy. It was about embracing the full spectrum of my human experience. I learned that vulnerability built deeper connections with others and allowed me to be more authentic. I also realized that vulnerability wasn't about being perfect. It was about being real. It was about acknowledging my flaws and challenges while still moving forward with confidence. Paying it forward. As I continued to evolve, I found myself increasingly driven to help others along their own journeys. I had been so lucky to have had mentors and support when I started, and I knew that I had a responsibility to pay that forward. I began mentoring others who were struggling with their own mindset, offering guidance and sharing the tools that had helped me. It wasn't always easy, and not everyone was ready to change. But seeing someone transform because they believed in their own potential was incredibly rewarding. I realized that by helping others, I wasn't just contributing to their growth, I was reinforcing my own. Every conversation, every shared insight, and every piece of advice deepened my understanding of what it means to conquer the mind. Living with purpose. Through all the ups and downs, the one thing that remained constant was my purpose. I had learned that conquering my mind wasn't just about overcoming fear, it was about living with intention. It was about deciding what I wanted my life to look like and then taking action, one thought at a time, to make that vision a reality. I also learned that purpose isn't always clear at the beginning, and it may evolve as you grow. It wasn't something that was handed to me on a silver platter. It was something I discovered through living, exploring, and experimenting. But once I understood my purpose, everything fell into place. It gave me direction, motivation, and a reason to keep going, even on the hardest days. A new beginning. Now, I find myself at a place where I am content but still hungry for growth. I know there will always be new challenges, and I will continue to face fear and self-doubt along the way. But I also know that I have the mental strength to handle whatever life throws at me. I am no longer living on autopilot, reacting to circumstances. I am living intentionally, guided by the belief that I have the power to shape my reality through the way I think and act. And that's what conquering your mind ultimately leads to. The ability to create a life that is not dictated by fear or limiting beliefs, but by the power of your own choices. The journey of mastering my mind continues. And with every step I take, I know I am becoming the best version of myself, stronger, wiser, and more aligned with my true purpose. The road is never easy, but it is always worth it. The journey of conquering your mind is one of continual evolution. And with each victory, You become more equipped to face the next challenge. There is no finish line in this race, but the transformation you undergo along the way will redefine who you are. And in the process, you will create a life that is beyond your wildest dreams. I'm so glad you spent this time with me. If you like the story, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Take care, and see you next time.